Good evening and welcome to the Phelps-Clifton Springs Central School District Annual Budget Hearing. I'd like to call the meeting to order. Crystal,
Nope.
Call to order. Crystal, would you like to lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
On behalf of the Board of Education, I'm pleased to be presenting a budget to the community with a 0% tax increase, which allows Midlakes to provide programs and resources for our students to succeed. And now I'd like to turn it over to Mr. Sickles and Tracy Marshall.
Thank you, Mrs. Wilkes. So welcome to our annual budget hearing in anticipation and leading up to our annual budget vote, which is scheduled for next Tuesday, May 18th. We'll just take this opportunity to present the overall budget, which has been discussed at length at board meetings for several months now, with several meetings per month in most cases. This is just an outline of the topics we'll cover. We'll talk about the goals that governed and sort of guided the budget development process. This year was a little unique in that the goals evolved as the financial forecast and aid forecast changed and shaped what we felt we could do. Talk about the highlights of this year's budget, budget changes and some equipment needs that we're able to address, the overall appropriations and revenue leading to the total budget amount, a look at our reserves and our tax levy history, and then this is an unusual part of our budget hearing, not normally part of the agenda, but we're going to take a look at the state and federal aid changes that have enabled us to propose the budget that we are, and a little bit of an overview of those federal funds and how they're going to impact what we can do for our students. We'll review our propositions that the voters will act upon next Tuesday and review the Board of Education candidates. So, we always have the annual goal to meet the needs of students while being responsible to our taxpayers. You know, we always balance those two goals. Sometimes they seem like they're in competition with each other, but we have to find a way to achieve both of them at the same time, and we feel like we've done that in this case, in large part due to the federal funds that came unexpectedly, as well as the unexpected increase in foundation aid, which we'll talk about. Certainly in the context of the COVID-19 pandemic, it's our goal to support in-person instruction during the coming budget year, 21-22, to close learning and social emotional gaps that widened during the pandemic, to replace aging equipment to support student activities and district operations, and we'll explain that in a little bit more detail, to streamline district operations and increase efficiencies. This is something that we're always trying to do, and most importantly, to stabilize the local tax levy and protect the long-term availability of district reserves. So those are the goals. Some of them are annual, long-standing. They come back every year, and some sort of evolved over the course of this budget cycle. Budget highlights, really, this budget comes down to the budget itself comes down to the increased foundation aid of about $834,000 that we received. And we found that out in early April. Back at the beginning of the school year, we were in quite a different position as we were anticipating mid-year cuts and potential significant cuts to aid for the 21-22 school year, and we're taking measures to prepare ourselves for that. So we ended up with quite a different narrative at the end. So due to that increased foundation aid, we are able to replace a few key pieces of aging equipment. We're able to maintain some positions and services added in response to COVID-19 that we expect to need going into the next calendar year or the next school year. As Mrs. Wilkes mentioned, we're able to keep the local tax levy flat and decrease our use of district reserves by a little bit. Very quickly, and we'll address this more a little later in this presentation, but in much more detail in regular session. We will utilize federal grants strategically to position the district to financially support in-person instruction in 21-22 according to the applicable guidelines, restore positions that were originally identified for absorption, and add positions necessary to address learning gaps, social emotional gaps, and other student and district needs. So the combination of the increased foundation aid and the availability of these federal funds have enabled us to go out at a 0% tax levy increase while also feeling confident that we can meet the needs of our students that are quite unique coming out of a very difficult year. This is just a review of a slide that has, I think, appeared and evolved over the course of every budget presentation, but this is just an overview of some of the, the changes in this budget. We did have a computer services assistant leave during the year, and we were able to replace that service at a savings through BOCES. We absorbed a school psychologist position early in the year when a school psychologist left for another opportunity. That was a position early in the year we thought we were going to have to absorb permanently. We're now grateful that while we can remove it from the budget, it's in red, because we will be able to replace that position through the federal grant funds. There is a half-time aide, half-time typist position that opened up when somebody got a promotion. This is an area where we were able to get a little bit more efficient, and we absorbed that position, so it's being removed from the budget. The part-time SRO savings is simply putting onto the books the savings that was negotiated with Ontario County after the passage of last year's budget. So this reflects no change in our SRO service from this year, but simply documenting and building those savings into the budget. A cleaner position that was added in response to COVID needs has been kept in the budget. A clerical retirement, which we originally planned to absorb, we will take it out of the budget, but we will be able to restore and fill that position through the grant funds. We had a part-time BOCES HR service that we're going to absorb into our business office. So those are the major changes that have led to a net reduction in our spending in these particular areas. Once we realized that we were getting that additional foundation aid, it gave us the opportunity to address some needs that we knew were there, we were concerned about, and we weren't entirely sure how quickly we were going to be able to address them, but they are somewhat pressing needs. We have high school gymnasium scoreboards that are about 25 years old, maybe more than that, and that are really in need of replacement, and those are estimated at $25,000. The electronic sign at the corner of 488 and Route 96, if you're traveling from the west, from Clifton Springs, headed towards Phelps, that side of the sign, you'll see that there's some missing, some dark spots in the sign. That sign's made up of panels, and when the panels go, they go. And we've rearranged them a couple times to try to maximize where the graphics most often are, but that sign is dying and it's time to replace it, and if we don't, it's just going to go dark and sit there. So that replacement, not the structure, but just the sign itself, which will fit in the structure that exists, is estimated at $40,000. And then we have an aging bus lift that is very much in need of replacement, that is estimated at $210,000. So that all adds up to an investment in district equipment between $275,000. Budget or equipment codes are strictly governed, so those allocations have to be made specific to those equipment lines. Those are things, again, that without the increased foundation aid would not have been possible. The next couple slides just talk about our overall appropriations and revenues and the overall budget. And if I may just kick it over to Mrs. Marshall.
Thank you. So let's start off with the appropriation budget. The general support and the instructional budget are basically rollovers. What you would generally see there would be a little bit higher percentage, but due to the reductions that Matt just spoke about, there's a bit of a savings in both of those lines. The general support would cover the Board of Education, the district office, the business office, and operations and maintenance aspects of the districts. Instruction covers all the instructional activities we do within the district. Transportation is up slightly. That's due to additional bus driving positions being added. Hopefully we'll be able to fill those positions as we enter into the new school year. Our benefits is a function of our healthcare costs, which were up about 10% this year. We also pay employee retirement system and teacher retirement system for the employer's share of retirement costs. All of those costs are beyond things that we control within the district. The healthcare consortium that we're in, Flash Peace, sets its healthcare rates. We're typically under what the community rates are, so by being in that healthcare consortium, we do save money. The healthcare rate, again, this year was about 10%, and I know they did their best to kind of keep that number down for the districts. The debt service is just adjusted slightly. This is the money that we pay on our building debt for our capital projects. That's just a function of a little bit less interest that's owed for next year. Community service covers our aquatic center and all of that, those activities that we offer to the public. The interfund transfers may stand out to you a bit, as that looks like a giant jump there, and it is. As Matt just mentioned, we're looking to buy a bus lift to the tune of about $210,000. Because of how we have to fund that project will go from the general fund, the dollars, over to what we call the capital fund, and that's required by law in order to purchase that lift, and that transfer has to happen on that line, so it's very specifically budgeted there for a reason. Overall, we're up about $822,000 or 2.2%. And how do we cover all of these expenses? Here is the revenue budget. Again, as we've mentioned, the real property taxes this year are flat. So what does that mean? It means that the amount of money that we're raising on the taxes stays the same. That may not be the same for individual taxpayers, because the amount of taxpayers that individual taxpayers pay is based on the assessment of their homes. So not all taxpayers may see no change in their tax bill. It's all based on what we call equalization rates and assessments rates that are set by the Real Property Tax Office of Ontario in Wayne County. Other revenues are flat. These are revenues we receive from renting our facilities to BOCES. Our state aid is up. Again, we got an increase in our foundation aid, which is our general aid that we can use across our budget of about $834,000. This was a welcome surprise, as many of you may recall in years past. This has actually been either flat or declining. So we were pleasantly pleased with the increase in foundation aid to reflect what our foundation aid formula says that the district's supposed to receive from year to year. There's a little bit of difference between the 834 and the 917 change you see there. We also receive reimbursements on expenses we make in the previous year and the following year. So that's just based on the actual projected expenses that we are having this year that will be reimbursed for next year, just up slightly in some of those areas. Our reserves and debt service is down about $95,000. We reduced the use of our ERS reserve, that's our Employees Retirement System reserve. We were able to do that again because of that unexpected increase in foundation aid. We want to be very careful with how we use our reserves long term because they're finite, and we want to make sure that we have enough to last us over a period of time so that we don't become too reliant on the use of those reserves. We're also using the unemployment reserve at about $10,000 and our teacher retirement system at about $15,000. And the debt service reserve is to use to offset our debt service payments that I previously mentioned, and we're doing about $550,000 out of that reserve. That brings our total budget this year to $38,310,998, or an increase of $822,996, or 2.20% from 2021. Again, the tax levy is at $14.8 million, 0% increase from this year as well. So just a little bit more detail on our reserve funds. I've already mentioned the ERS, TRS reserve, and the unemployment reserve. We also use our bus purchase reserve to purchase our buses every year. This allows us to pay cash for our buses and not have to bond debt, which then incurs us bonding costs and interest costs. We receive about 90% aid back on those purchases over a 5-year period. And this just allows us to recycle through that reimbursement to then purchase more buses in the future. Again, it saves us financing costs, and which is, sometimes pretty significant on these types of purchases. That's it. Thank you.
Okay, so this is our tax levy history. Thank you, Tracy. This is another slide that we show often. In 2012-13, the state instituted the tax levy cap. So that is, I believe, the red line represents our cap in each of those years since, and the blue line represents the actual tax levy increase that the district went out at. Over the last couple years, not anticipating large increases in foundation aid, and actually anticipating flat at best and sometimes decreases, we've tried to seek to level out at 2% on the tax levy increase. Last year, as COVID hit right in the middle of budget cycle, in the budget season, we had to go out at 2.75, which was higher than we had wanted to go, but was necessary at the time, but was still below our tax levy limit. Our goal when this budget cycle started out, we were talking 2.5, then news got a little bit better and it was 2.25, and then we were hoping maybe to stay under 2, and then we got that huge jump in foundation aid, and we're able to offset the increase from last year of 2.75 by going out at 0% this year. As both Tracy and I have mentioned, this budget is the product of two things. One is our general state aid, our foundation aid increase of $834,026. Again, not anticipated, but really key to being able to meet those equipment needs, but also going out at 0% and decreasing some of our reliance on our reserves. We then received several large grants, 2 federal grants, the Coronavirus Response and Relief Supplemental Appropriations Act of 2021, which we refer to as CRRSA. We were allocated $1.5 million. And the American Rescue Plan Act of 2021, we were allocated a little over $4 million. We did not anticipate those amounts at all. And those really enabled us to shift our thinking in terms of how to meet our students' needs moving forward and our district operational needs. Those funds are specifically designed to help close learning gaps and other operational needs in response to the COVID pandemic. There are specific rules, and we'll go over in a minute some of the considerations that will go into our use of those funds, and then in regular session we'll get into a little bit more detail, and then we'll finalize the plan in June. But those are 2 significant pots of money that can be used over multiple years, and we'll be able to really dig into some of those needs that were created over the last 14 or 15 months. And then we also received an additional $400,000 in our Universal Pre-Kindergarten Program grant, and we're currently working on a plan because there's some specific rules attached to that increase in terms of what those funds can be used for. So in addition to developing a plan for the CRRSA funds and the rescue plan funds, we're also clarifying the rules around the UPK increase and deciding how we can best use those funds to increase the services available to our youngest learners. Some important considerations to keep in mind with regard to the federal funds. They are short-term. They last 2 to 3 years, and they are completely separate from the general fund budget. So they will have their own separate plan. We'll start a draft of that plan in regular session tonight, but they are not part of the budget. Because they're short-term, we have to be careful and strategic in how we use those. They will be used to address learning gaps, support social emotional needs, and supplement district operations, and avoid layoffs in response to COVID-19. Those are all identified goals of those grant programs. The rescue plan requires enhanced summer school and before and after school program over the life of those funds, which is 3 years, and we're in the process of developing those plans. The district will plan for the short-term duration of these funds. We don't want to create our own fiscal cliff when these funds expire. So if we do use them to create positions, and we anticipate that we will, we need to be very strategic and upfront and transparent about those. Whenever possible, we will budget to absorb those positions where they make sense to be long-term. We'll try to align them when they have to be absorbed with retirements, or in some cases, if they're targeted at short-term learning gaps, they'll be identified very clearly as short-term positions, so that we're very transparent with people who fill them. One-time expenses like furniture, supplies, curriculum, professional development have less of a long-term impact on the budget, and we will try to maximize the use of these funds for those types of expenditures. Again, the long-term sustainability of added positions must be considered based on the continued need. So it is conceivable that we may add positions that may only be needed for 1 year, while some may be needed for all 3 years of the funds being available, or some of them may be needed long-term, and we'll have to find ways to absorb them into the budget. So we'll be thinking about how to absorb them in all the ways that are identified there in that bullet. We will start a draft plan tonight in regular session, as I've said, but the district will develop and present a final spending plan and present it at the June board meeting. So these are the ballot propositions. So a week from tomorrow, on May 18th, is our annual budget vote and school board election. So the first resolution on the ballot is to adopt the annual budget for the fiscal year 21-22, and to authorize the requisite portion thereof to be raised by taxation on the taxable real property of the district. So that's a standard proposition. It reflects that total amount of $38 million in expenditures, and it reflects that 0% increase in the overall tax levy. The second proposition is to elect 3 members of the Board of Education to 3-year terms, commencing on July 1, 2021 and expiring June 30th, 2024. And we do have 4 candidates for those 3 terms, which I'll review in a moment. The third proposition is to authorize the board to expend up to $392,951 for the purchase of school buses to be paid from the bus purchase reserve, as Tracy explained. So we have that bus purchase reserve there for that purpose, so that it does not impact the general fund budget. And then finally, this is an annual proposition. A separate proposition shall be on the ballot for approval of an increase in the annual appropriations for the Clifton Springs Library in the amount of $84,000, and an increase in the annual appropriation for the Phelps Community Memorial Library in the amount of $84,000. This is not an amount levied by the school district. Rather, we facilitate this vote for them, and we collect this tax on their behalf. but then cut a check to them. So this is not district money. This is simply a community partnership that is quite common, where the school district that already, houses an annual vote holds the vote on behalf of the libraries. So we do have 4 candidates for 3 vacant seats. According to educational law, we held a random draw of the candidates to determine the order in which they appear on the ballot, and this is how they will appear. Don Miller, Lindsay Marino, Amber Wilkes, and Tracy Hall. And voters will have the opportunity to vote for any 3 of the 4, or up to any 3 of the 4. And that concludes our presentation for the budget hearing, and we would open it up to any questions. If there are any members of the public who would like to ask a question, we ask that you use the podium and microphone, and that you just please identify yourself by name and address before asking your question.
Last call for any questions? If not, we will move on to the budget hearing adjourned.
Okay, so we are adjourned.
Okay. Thank you.
Mr. Gowan, are we clear? Huh? We're good.
Yeah, I should have working on six. So she'll show up. He did say something about. He did say something about.
You can tell a difference from the better than last time. The last time I couldn't find anyone. So South and Mountains was. So that's good.
Okay.
Yeah, I think we're ready to get started.
Okay. Just tell me when we get done. Well, we gotta do all, we have to do all this first. Yeah. Oh, right. So we need to go ahead. I'm ready to start. Wait, once you get up there, we'll have give us a thumbs up.
Just give me
All right, give us a thumbs up.
hello. Good evening, and welcome to the May 10th, 2021 Board of Education meeting. Crystal, could you please lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Roll call. Crystal,
Here.
Tracy, Matt Sickles,
Present?
Lindsay Altman, present. Ryan Davis,
Here.
Kent Murphy,
Here.
Jake Amadon,
Here.
and Sherry Sherbin is also present. Moving on to the approval of the agenda.
I make a motion to approve the agenda.
Is there any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Motion carried. Moving on to consent agenda items.
I make a motion to approve the consent agenda items A through F.
Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Motion carried. Moving on to presentations. Item A, recognition of the class of 2021, valedictorian and salutatorian, Mr. Bay Rossi.
Thank you. Everybody here tonight? So tonight we're here to recognize the incredible work and dedication of the class of 2021 valedictorian and salutatorian. Both these young ladies that we are here to recognize have proven themselves to be dedicated not only to their academics, put to their community. Now, we'll give you a short list. Our three people, Mary Preston Hicks Foundation Board, Interact Club, Yearbook Club, Mastermind, Class President, Indoor Outdoor Credit, Concert Band, Dance Band, and National Honor Society. That is just a short list of the clubs and activities that these young ladies participate in while excelling in their academics. Available this morning, Lindsay Wright will be attending Cornell University College of Engineering to major in biomedical engineering. A salutatorian, Larry Bradley, will be attending St. John Fisher, where she will study nursing. Now, we have also, I say we, I mean Mr. Clausen, has prepared a short video for us to celebrate these wonderful young ladies and young people. So congratulations to both of you, and we're going to show a short video.
I'm Lindsay Wright. My plans for next year is to attend Cornell University. I'm Midlakes' class of 2021 valedictorian.
My name's Riley Bradley. I plan on going to college for nursing, and I'm second in my class.
Growing up in a small community, like being able to be one-on-one and like have the relationship even with our class, because it's less than 200 people. Like, I know virtually everyone in our class and able to still have that bond with them.
I think it's important to have a good relationship with my teachers and being able to communicate with them and tell them like anything I don't understand or questions, and reaching out to them whenever I need anything.
Mrs. Everson, who is the Interact Club advisor, she taught me Algebra 2, trigonometry, and this year in statistics. We could still have a conversation, talk about life, talk about how we were feeling during the pandemic, and like with no opinions at all.
I'd say Mrs. Gibson is one of them. I've had her for 3 years now, and I've come to have like a pretty good relationship with her, like in and out of school.
Mrs. Simmons is also one of my favorites. She is the yearbook club advisor, and we went on trips together, like going to New Orleans for Soaring Valor, and just building a deeper connection with her.
Mrs. Hannix is another one. I enjoyed having her. She's a fun teacher to have. How close you can be with everyone, because it's a smaller school and there's a lot of good staff, and just like the relationships you can have with everyone, since it isn't as large, you can get close to people.
Definitely the teachers. I am so lucky to have spent the time to make the connections with them, and I know that they'll all miss me too, and so I definitely want to come back and visit. I know that we're all really resilient, able to bounce back and like take these obstacles and like learn how to deal with them.
Probably to not take for granted being able to like see people, because once you don't get to see anyone, it really opens your eyes to how much life can change. It's important to put yourself first before anyone else. Like, you'll realize over the course of high school that the friends you have changes, and the people around you don't stay, or you meet new people, but you always should put yourself first.
Your time here is limited, and to really take advantage of it, because these are the days that you're going to miss after you graduate.
Congratulations.
Yes, thank you so much for being here. Congratulations, and I think all of us would like to extend our congratulations to your families as well, as I know that they have supported you all these years. in helping you to accomplish all that you have.
And please come back and visit. Tell us what you've done. Thank you.
Congratulations.
Okay, moving on to presentation B, updated reopening plan for full in-person instruction at Midlakes Elementary School. And I believe the administrative team is going to be speaking to us about that.
Get the right one here. Okay, so this is one that I believe Mr. Moyer and Mrs. Benzer and Mrs. Marshall are going to assist in, but as everybody knows, and as we'll hear more about, today was the first day of the return of full in-person instruction for UPK through grade 6 at the elementary school, and we had to update our reopening plan to reflect that, and that was posted on our school website last Monday, but we want to just present a brief overview. So we did have to upload this. It was guided by the New York State Department of Health guidance, needed to be uploaded to the State Education Department website and submitted to the Ontario County Department of Health, and the required our original reopening plan stays up and stays submitted and governs most of what we continue to do. But the required updates were any changes to the reopening of school facilities for in-person instruction, and I've put that in quotations because we have been open for in-person instruction, but it's going to be changes to support full in-person instruction. How we're going to continue to monitor health conditions, contain the potential transmission of COVID-19, and then how we would be prepared for the closure of school activities and a switch and a closure of in-person instruction if necessitated by widespread virus transmission. So we'll go quickly through this. The plan is available along with our original reopening plan. The short update is on our website, so it is available for review, but we just want to hit the highlights. So some key considerations in this decision was the Ontario County COVID-19 transmission rate, which is based upon total cases per 100,000 residents in the county over a 7-day rolling period cumulatively, and that determines whether a county is determined to be at low, moderate, substantial, or high risk. County does continue to be at the high risk level, was at the high risk level when this decision was made, but at the elementary level, it does allow elementary schools to reduce physical distance to at least 3 feet, but student cohorts are recommended. And that means keeping groups of students together throughout the day, which is essentially how our elementary school is set up routinely anyway. So this was a recommendation that we were able to accommodate and continue, and did factor into our decision because we are able to offset the reduction of physical distancing with keeping those students with one group, one cohort throughout the day. So we were able to accommodate that. We were very clear with the community as we were required to measure the community's tolerance for risk, that bus capacity limitations would require in many cases for Midlakes to load 2 students per seat as needed to support full in-person instruction. And then full remote instruction does remain an option that some UPK through 6 students, their families have chosen for them, but at about the same percentage that we have had. At this point, I'd like to invite Mr. Moyer and Mrs. Benzer to talk about some of the procedural changes that help support this change, and they can speak to how today went.
So as far as the physical distancing piece, which is a little bit about, inside our classrooms, it's going to be 3 feet from physical distancing from 6 feet. So all of our students are in desks facing the same direction. Because of that switch to 3 feet in the classroom, we have gone back to using the cafeteria as part of our sensory before lunch, so that we can maintain 6 feet that is recommended by the DOE. So within the cafeteria in that lunch space, you'll notice that there are tables with two students per table facing the same direction. During that time, they're not using their masks and they're eating their lunch. As far as classes go, we used to have classes in the classroom prior to these changes. Now we want to turn back to a dedicated area. Most of that space, for example, in the gym, if you're not in the gym, even if you are in the gym, we're trying to include 12 students and utilize the outside space as well. As well as in the gym, so you can and then the mandatory face covering, we are requiring that all adults and students wear masks. That's at all times of the day, especially in classrooms and hallways. We do utilize mask space that is different in different grade levels. For example, I think in my class, in the first row, we take your mask off for a break and then skip row, and then go to the first row, so that's the topic. That person is very tough. That covers it as far as talk about today.
Hi, everybody. Wow. So we have been waiting for today since last month, and we did it. You know, with everything that Elaine just talked about, you know, the day went exceptionally well. It was very exciting, seeing people, you know, seeing kids in the hallway. It was noisy. It was wonderful. So it went extremely well. You know, you got the minor hiccups, but the reason that today went well was the collaborative approach. You know, from Mr. Reesbeck and his crews, to everybody from the teachers to the office staff, the collaborative approach, problem solving, listening. That's what made today go well. You know, it was the group of people working together to make it happen. You know, everything that Alina talked about, you know, arrival a little slower than normal if you had children coming in, but very smooth. We did a minor reroute of some traffic to siphon off our UPK classroom, our UPK students, which made a world of difference in the arrival procedure because our UPK parents get out. And you know, hug their kids goodbye, and by the time they get to kindergarten, they say get out and go to class. But you know, they still are very slow when they're at the UPK level, getting them to arrival. So we rerouted them, and it made a world of difference in our procedure this morning. Breakfast, again, somewhat slow. Our K through 3 are eating in the cafeteria, everyone else in the classroom, everything that Elena alluded to with masks and all those regulations. But in general, very well. Went very well today. Lunch, could not have asked for a better day and go back to the cafeteria. It was just nice to have kids again. You know, just having them eat, listening to them talking to each other. You know, and we gave the same speech 12 times today. We had 3 different cafeteria areas going for lunches, so we were very busy in the cafeterias, but we learned that many monitors make that work smoothly. Classrooms, our teachers are reestablishing expectations and procedures. Expectations are a little different when you have 6 kids, 7 kids, 8 kids versus, you know, 12, 14, 15, 16 kids. So it's a big transition for our students and our teachers. So they're reestablishing procedures while they are still focused on academics. It's a tough time. You know, and this week will be all about that balance, and then it'll be like we've been doing it all year. You know how it goes. And dismissal went extremely well. Again, if it's slow, a lot of parents very thankful. A lot of parents that when we said, sorry, it wasn't as fast as normal, said, don't worry about it, it'll come. You know, people were extremely understanding, very patient with each other, and the whole process will be adjusted as we go. You know, everything that Elena talked about with rules and regulations, seeing what works, what doesn't work, and, you know, if today's an indication of the rest of the year, we're in a good place.
That's great.
Thank you, Mrs. Benzer, Mr. Moyer. At this point, I'd like to turn it over to Mrs. Marshall, who oversees our operational departments. And as we have learned throughout this whole process, getting students to school and then feeding them under new regulations this year are key components to supporting in-person instruction. So I'd like her to talk a little bit about that.
Thank you. So to start off, let's talk a little bit about our transportation. One of the first considerations or challenges we had to bringing back students 5 days a week was how we were going to get them here safely. We considered many different approaches, and ultimately we settled on pre-K 5, maximum 2 students per seat. Families and daycare students can sit together. We tried to seat the students 1 per seat until we can no longer do that, and then we would add the 2 per seat at that point. Our 6 through 12 buses are running on a different schedule. We had capacity limits at the pre-K through 5, so the 6th graders are bussed in with the 7 through 12 students. Those buses have a little bit more capacity. Some of those buses do not have 2 per seat. Some of them do, depending on the areas in which they're picking up students. We've also had to reroute all the bus runs. Originally, we had routed our hybrid model, which was structured a little bit different than our normal yearly runs to accommodate how we were bringing those students in. Families would have received letters late last week and late the week before on Friday and then early last week with the schedule changes. I know that the transportation department has been very busy in trying to navigate changes and trying to keep up with those, but they're certainly welcome to have feedback once families kind of get into this new role. I know there's been several changes in pickup and drop-off times. There's a little bit of adjustment period with those changes, and it didn't just impact our pre-K 5 runs, it also impacted our 6 through 12 runs. Because of bringing in kids 5 days a week in 6th grade, we had to reroute those runs as well. So those students that remained in the hybrid model 7-12 also have a whole new schedule to adjust to. Overall, everybody did an outstanding job. Again, to recognize what Chris was saying about his staff. Certainly our bus drivers and transportation department and mechanics have all worked really hard to make this happen this week, and we appreciate their efforts. Our child nutrition program had some changes as well. As you may recall, we've been delivering meals to home since last March through the summer and through the school year. All meals are free to all students. So those families, that have signed up were delivered meals to their homes until to this Monday. And now we're offering a pickup option to families. On Monday, they would pick up their meals at the northern entrance of the secondary building between 6:30 and 7:30. On Mondays, they would get 5 days worth of meals for those students that still remain in a remote model. So let's see. And also, as we mentioned, the students are eating in the cafeterias now. We are still using the brown bag format. We're not providing hot meals or buffet style at this time. I believe that the participation rates are up because all meals have been free, and we're really happy to be able to offer that with assistance from the state and federal funding that we get for those programs. And also, they have done a tremendous job in that department. I know the staff have been transitioning from doing all these deliveries and getting this all ready, and now today it's all in person, and they're very excited to have the students back and to be able to see them and provide them to, their meals in person. So that's very exciting for all of us as well.
Thank you, Tracy. And I'd just like to take a moment to recognize, not just our teachers and office staff, but our operational staff, transportation facilities, food service, are absolutely critical. They're always critical when you're educating 1,500 students. They've been even more critical during these extenuating circumstances, and then to shift gears midstream and make this change. They've done it with a smile, they've done it with determination, they've done it with just the best interests of our students right at the forefront. And this was a big undertaking, and we're incredibly grateful for the entire Midlakes family for making this happen. Another section of our reopening plan, the updates, is that we have to continue monitoring health conditions. So all the things that were true before continue to be true. But it just, at double the capacity, UPK through 6. So this is where especially our COVID-19 safety coordinator, or the COVID captain as we call him, and our school nurses, who have been absolutely phenomenal, come in. Every day we ask that our students and staff submit daily health screeners before they come to school. The nurses, with John's assistant, review those, make sure that they're all in. The nurses follow up if anybody's flagged with symptoms, or if there's any reason that they should be sent for testing. Our students are temperature checked on their way into the building, and our nurses communicate and collaborate with families and the local health departments. That has been a huge undertaking throughout the year, and the work that our nurses have done has just really been inspiring throughout this. Now to see them do that at double the capacity with every student in the building, and then to have all your normal students go to the nurse type stuff at normal enrollment and capacity. It was a busy place today, but they did it with a smile, and we're happy to have everybody back. So we are continuing to follow all of our same procedures to monitor that everybody's doing well and healthy enough to attend school. Containment of COVID-19 transmission. So throughout this process, and we spoke about this at the last board meeting, the whole process of helping to halt the spread of COVID-19 was the idea of a layered mitigation strategies, that no one thing that we do, whether it's masks or washing our hands or using hand sanitizer, no one thing is enough. It's layering those things on top of each other. And with the decreased physical distance that allows us to go to full in-person instruction at this level, all of the other safety measures become that much more important. So we really need that community effort, that family cooperation, our students, our staff, all of us working together to make sure that we're wearing face coverings, washing our hands, using hand sanitizer throughout the buildings, making sure that we're completing those daily health screenings. We're continuing with our cleaning and disinfection, making sure that our ventilation is good and our air filtration is taken care of and replaced on a regular basis. And then again, that collaboration with families and our local health departments, just to make sure that we're on top of any potential exposure, any potential symptom or positive case, so that we can remove that potential exposure from the environment as soon as possible. And we're grateful to our families with how cooperative they've been with our nurses and our entire staff. We do have to have a plan, as we have throughout, to be able to have to close school if necessary, and to stop in-person instruction and switch to remote instruction as necessary. So this has been built into our plan throughout, so we have regular communication and collaboration with the local health departments. Our local rates do seem to be starting to trail off, which is great news. But we will continue to share information and support mostly the Ontario County Health Department with contact tracing, but we do have some students in Wayne and Seneca counties. Ontario County, when necessary, in collaboration with those other counties, will make all the decisions regarding quarantines and the closure of classrooms or the whole school if necessary, although we hope that never becomes necessary, based on exposure or widespread transmission. So it's very clear that that's not a decision that's made by the school. That's a threshold that's monitored by the local health departments, and then we are advised as to what to do, whether it's a quarantine of a classroom or if we had to switch to full remote instruction for a period of time. Again, we're hoping with all of our other precautions that that's not necessary, but we do have our remote instruction plan in our regular reopening plan, and we've been through that, and we'll switch if we have to. It does bear saying, however, that even though the guidelines do allow for the reduction of physical distancing to 3 feet. All of the area Finger Lakes public health departments have made it very clear that they're going to continue to contact trace based upon 6 feet. So if there is a positive case and an exposure, we may see more quarantines than we have in the past. When we were 6 feet apart, you might have a positive case, and sometimes it resulted in no quarantine, sometimes it resulted in 4 or 5. I would expect to see those numbers go up, and at the younger grades, you might see whole classrooms. So hopefully, everybody does a really good job with all those other mitigation strategies, and a closure or a switch to remote learning is not necessary. So that's a quick overview of the updated plan. Again, the entire original plan's available on the website. The document updating our plan is there as well. But we're all here if there's any questions from the board, since there is a motion on the agenda to just approve that updated plan. Okay.
I did have a question. Did you mention that the meals for all children are free this year?
Right.
The child and nutrition departments of state ed and the federal government have provided 100% reimbursement for what they reimburse, the portion of the cost they reimburse for all meals UPK 12, breakfast and lunch. I will mention that we anticipate that this will continue for next summer and through the next school year. That has been the commitment that we've heard thus far. Of course, things can always change, but I believe we'll be excited to be able to continue that into the following school year.
So any child that comes to school and wants to buy breakfast or lunch gets it for free?
Absolutely, that's correct.
Or is learning remotely.
Right.
Oh.
Yes, and in that case, they would have to pick it up, but
Right.
yes.
So, as I believe was printed in the budget newsletter, the Midlakes Journal, I believe the number is up to 280,000 meals.
Oh,
That
wow.
was as of when that went to print. So the participation rate is incredible. And again, kudos to our food service department for stepping up and meeting that increased need. It's great to be able to provide that service to our community.
When did that come into? I mean, I'm sorry if I'm lost in all the other details, but when did that come into effect? Was that recently, or I know you had been working on it
Since last March.
Oh, geez.
It came about. We had to apply for it kind of retroactively. They did 100% approve it until the summer, and then it became clear that they were going to extend it into the school year at that time. I just recently learned of the extension into the following school year as well. I have not seen the actual application papers on that yet, but we anticipate they should be out shortly.
It'd be interesting to see if performance levels just increase because of the availability of meals
No,
for
it's
kids,
great.
right?
Yes, this is.
Wow, that's exciting.
Yeah.
To be able
Super
to feed
exciting.
all of our students is really.
Yeah, that's super exciting.
Yes.
Thank you so much. Any other questions? No? Thank you for that. Okay, let's move on to presentation C, continuation of hybrid model for Midlakes Middle and High School students. Again, I see administrative team will be sharing with us.
Yeah, with a few different players on this one. So, as everyone knows, last Monday, the 3rd, we announced the decision that unlike at the elementary level, at the secondary level, we would finish the year out in the hybrid model, and we wanted to share the information and thought process that went into that decision. So we have a few of our administrative team will assist. But again, key considerations, first and foremost, the Ontario County COVID-19 transmission rate. Again, the number of cases per 100,000 residents over a cumulative cases over a 7-day period. And unlike the elementary level, at the secondary level, middle high school, however school is designed, and for us that's 7-12, some districts it's 6-12 if it's the middle high school level. At the high transmission rate where we have been for quite some time, districts cannot go to reduce physical distancing unless they can cohort students. And cohort, again, that's part of our normal operations at the elementary school, so we could comply with that recommendation and offset the reduced physical distancing by having students with a finite number of other students throughout the day. At the secondary level, cohorting is very difficult because students have dynamic schedules. You rarely find two kids who have the same schedule as each other because they're going to different math teachers and English classes and social studies and electives, and they have lunch different periods, and schedules are very dynamic. And to cohort students into the secondary level means they sit in a room, one group of kids, all day long, which means we may all start off together as the same English class, but then when the bell rings, we can't go off to our separate places. And then our teachers, therefore, have to stay put and essentially have to teach remotely. And the kids, yes, they'd be physically on campus every day, but they'd be static in one room, having to essentially learn remotely. And to us and to most secondary schools, that's really a step backwards from the hybrid model, because there'd really be no in-person instruction. So, the Department of Health, CDC guidelines, again, they do require at the high transmission rate where we have been, certainly we're solidly there at the time of the decision and leading up to it, we had to maintain 6 feet. Even at the substantial transmission rate, which is the next level down, student cohorts are recommended. Again, for us to go to full in-person at the secondary level, we can't cohort. We'd have to go back to the regular 8-period day. And now we would not be able to offset the reduced physical distancing by keeping kids with just one group all day. We'd be at reduced physical distancing, and then they'd be mixing together each student 8 different ways throughout the day. So if there was ever a positive case, the contact tracing and the potential exposure and quarantine would be much more extensive than at the elementary level where we can cohort. So again, Midlakes Middle High School is unable to assign students to cohorts. We had to keep that in mind. Moving from class to class would not have been possible. Another really driving piece of information were the results of the family questionnaire, which Michelle Robinette will go over in a little bit. The results of that questionnaire did not demonstrate strong interest in switching to full in-person instruction, even if the local transmission rate dropped. So even if we do get into the substantial range, the interest, as you'll see, simply isn't there. And since the guidance does require us to measure the community's tolerance for risk, and on top of the busing issue that we talked about with the elementary, now we would be reduced physical distancing and mixing the kids up every 35 to 40 minutes. We just simply didn't have the level of family interest that indicated that they had that high tolerance for risk. And then finally, where we are in the school year played into that decision as well. As you'll see with an amendment based on the Regent's schedule, amendment to our school calendar, June 16th is going to be the last day of regular classes for grades 7 through 12, so that was a factor as well. So the Ontario County transmission rate, per the CDC website and their COVID data tracker, Ontario County is still listed as a high transmission area based on 118 cases over the last 7 days for a ratio of 107.49 cases per 100,000. That's the lowest we have been in quite some time. We had been up to about 245 cases a few weeks ago. We had a jump last week. Ontario County credits a really good weekend for even getting to where we are, and there is a good sign. However, they are following some pending tests to see. So you could see that number drop into the substantial range this week. That is a possibility. But again, given all the factors I just reviewed, and the timing, and the hurdles that we would have to overcome. That decision was made last Monday. And again, that reminder that even at the substantial transmission level, student cohorts are recommended, but difficult to implement at that level. So at this point, I turn it over to Michelle Robinette, who graciously compiled our family questionnaire data, and we'll talk to sort of what that told us.
Hey, can you hear me? I'm trying to walk the line of different mics, so
We can hear you.
we'll see. The first slide represents just the amount of response to the questionnaire. So it is broken out by grade level. You can see, for instance, on the 7th grade line, 65 student responses or students' family responses out of 114 7th graders means that 57% of the 7th graders had responses to the questionnaire. When you take the entire 7-12 building, there was 350 separate responses out of 705 students, which makes up 49.6%, so just under half of the student body. The second slide takes into account the question that was asked: would you prefer to go to 5 days of in-person instruction at the 7-12 level, or would you prefer to finish the school year in the hybrid model? Again, 7th grade as the example, 33 out of 65 of the respondents said that they would prefer 5 days, which is 50.8%, whereas 32 out of 65 said they'd prefer to finish the year in the hybrid model, which is 49.2%. Again, very close to that 50% mark. And when you look at the overall building, 189 out of 350 total responses means 54% said they'd prefer going to 5 days of in-person, whereas 46% said they would prefer to finish the year in the hybrid model. While that may look like the majority or slight majority preferred 5 days, when you take it into the context on the next slide of the entire student body 7-12, I've broken it out into the percentage that chose they would prefer 5 day, the percentage that would prefer finishing the year in hybrid, and then the no response category, or the ones that are unaccounted for. In looking at it this way, you can see overall, it's actually 26.8% who responded and said they would prefer to go to 5 days of in-person instruction. So about 1/4, just over 1/4 of the student body. Whereas another 22.8% of the student body voiced they would prefer to stay in the hybrid model for the rest of this school year. And again, that just over 50% did not respond. So we're unsure at this time. Does that mean that they would prefer to just finish the year as is? Do they not feel strongly either way?
Thank you, Michelle. So again, a big part of the guidance document stressed the importance of measuring the community's tolerance for risk. And, the risks that were involved at the secondary level had to do with, the bus capacity, similar to the elementary, the reduced physical distancing, similar to the elementary, but then that added piece of not being able to cohort the students and having the students circulate in just so many different combinations throughout the day at reduced physical distancing, to have only half of our students represented, that only half of those families felt strongly enough to respond, and that really only a quarter overall felt strongly enough to say we want to come back 5 days full in person. We just didn't feel that that was a signal of a high level of community tolerance for risk. So the decision was made and announced last Monday that Midlakes Middle High School will finish the current school year in the hybrid model. Again, that was based upon those family questionnaire results, the late stage of the school year, the local transmission rate, and the instructional limitations of cohorts for grades 7 through 12. That's just would actually be a step backwards in the amount of there'd be no in-person instruction really, or very little if we cohorted, and we felt like that instructionally that would be a step backwards. So while we will finish in the hybrid model, we are looking ahead to next school year. We expect the transmission rate to continue to drop. The state has made it clear that we have yet to see the guidance document that will govern the opening of school in September, but we are fully committed to getting to work as soon as, we're going to learn the lessons that that have happened this year. We're going to assume, based upon the guidance that we've been given for the remainder of this year, that we're going to have some opportunities. We would expect that the guidance will only get more flexible from there. So we're very hopeful for September, and that's where all of our energy is going to go, is to support full in-person instruction. But unfortunately, it just, for all the reasons identified, didn't make sense for the remainder of this year at the secondary level. I do want to turn it over to Mr. Bay Rossi, who's going to talk about, what does that mean for the rest of the school year? What are some of the things that the middle high school staff are going to do to support our students, and then give them the opportunity to try to bring you up to speed on the ever-changing status of the guidance that will govern end-of-the-year celebrations and graduation, because as he has learned, you cannot win. I'll just say, and I'm sure he'll tell a story, he held off as long as he can and waited to survey his students on a question. And then within 3 hours, the guidance governing that survey changed. So, Mr. Bay Rossi.
Okay. So I do, sit tight. I got a lot of information to give to you. I will try to make it as straightforward as possible, but we'll start with the good stuff. So the academic interventions that we've been employing this year, and I would say it's been throughout the year. We are in a hybrid model. We started out in a remote model, and we've learned a lot through that process, and a lot of what we can do, what works, what doesn't work, and how we fix those things. One of the things that we've really kind of honed in on this year is our Wednesdays. We've really kind of built up our Wednesday program, which is an intervention program when kids are struggling or kids need a little extra time. They're coming in from 7:30 to 10:30 in the morning. We now have a schedule that we run both at the middle school and the high school. Teachers sign up for kids specific to the areas that they're struggling in, and they can get those kids for periods of time, whether that be an hour or an hour and a half or 2 hours or 3 hours, just to make sure that they're staying on top of their academics. So we've really, over the year, built up that program to a larger and larger number of students that we're able to bring in on Wednesdays. One of the ways that we've gone about doing that is throughout the year, we've been holding weekly PSO meetings or mental health team meetings. During a normal year, I meet weekly with the PSO and once a month with the mental health team. We combined the two this year because we knew that there was going to be more need around the mental health area, so we combined that meeting so that we're meeting with that entire group every week. We have an engagement tool that we look at every week to see how students are engaged in their different classes, so we can specifically identify where students are struggling, where they're not engaging, and how we can try to help those students. I have done more home visits this year than I've done in my entire career, and that's just because I feel like I'm grasping the air most of the time. You have a student that's struggling, but they're at home 5 days a week, and to try to get them engaged while they're at home is difficult. There's no way around it. So myself, and I call him Uber Bob, Deputy Holland, takes me out every Friday, and we go and visit students and parents. And it has been useful to be able to go there and sit in front of them and talk to them, even if it's for 5, 10, 15 minutes, just to say, hey, what can we do? What supports do you need? Can we get you in on Wednesdays? And a lot of times those Wednesdays have been stepping stools to get kids back into the remote. Once they get back in the building, they say, hey, it's not so bad. I can tolerate this, and I'll come in, and we've been able to build upon that. So we've really used that. The other thing that we've really employed throughout the year is credit recovery. We've done a couple of things along the way. The first quarter and the second quarter, we had a floor of 50 for grades, so kids could not go below a 50. We wanted them to be able to adjust to the remote setting and then to the hybrid setting. But we've also our teachers have been offering students credit recovery throughout the year. So if they've missed something, they allow them to go back and try to finish them. We have a more structured plan for the end of the year, which that letter is going out tomorrow to families in a series of letters about credit recovery and how kids can approach their teachers and request credit recovery at the end of the year. We have identified June 18th as a credit recovery day because that's a non-instructional day, but teachers will be here so we can bring kids in to work specifically with their teachers on credit recovery. That doesn't mean that that's the only day of credit recovery. That's just one day that we know that the teachers don't have scheduled classes, so we will work on a plan with the teachers and transportation to get in as many kids as we can to target that credit recovery. But teachers are starting now with credit recovery for kids to try to get as many through the school year as we possibly can. So that's it for our academics. Social emotional. So this has been a big part of what we've done this year, and we've done a couple of things. And I would say one of the things that we started out at the beginning of the year was we purchased a program called FastBridge. And that has math, English, ELA, and it also has a social emotional piece to that. And it's a program that we can use to identify areas of need with students. Specifically in FastBridge, the My Saber portion of it is around social emotional. And it measures, it gives students a chance to self-assess their social, emotional, and behavioral feelings, strengths, weaknesses. And we've been able to use that data throughout the year in 7th and 8th grade. That right now that the pilot program is in 7th and 8th grade, and we've been able to target our ELA math results and also our social emotional results to say, okay, where are the needs in the building, in the grade, and specific to students so that we can try to address those needs. So as we saw this unfold throughout the year, we saw a need at the upper grades. So we don't have the program purchased for the high school, so we developed our own form that actually next week to our 9th graders, we're going to pilot our own form for this My Sabers to see where they are. And if this works out, our intention is to next year get that My Sabers program for the remainder of the high school so that we continue to look at that social emotional aspect and really drill down into where our areas of need are in the building and specifically where our students' needs are. So that we can continue to address those social and emotional needs. Like I said, we meet weekly with the PSO and my mental health team to talk about students and figure out what we need to do to try to help them. So there's been a large portion of our year that we've spent looking at the social emotional needs of our students because realistically this year, that's almost been bigger than academics, and it's needed to be. And I hate to say that as the leader of a building that's supposed to promote instruction, but that's the way it is. In the current situation that we're in, our students' social emotional needs sometimes outweigh their academic needs right now. So there's been a heavy focus on that. Last day of classes. Now this is just some of the nitty-gritty stuff. Mr. Sickles already talked about the last day of physical in-person class is June 16th. June 18th is our credit recovery day. We changed when our grades are due. They were going to be due later in the week of Regents Week, which ends on June 25th. Grades are going to be due on June 22nd, so we have an idea of what we're looking at for summer school and can start that registration process for summer school to make sure that we're getting as many students registered for summer school. We're making some changes to our summer school program so that we can involve more kids. We're talking about transportation for the kids this year so that we can make it accessible to everybody. Just so that we're trying to be proactive in that area. Regents exams, I'm sure you're very excited about these. I can tell you a little bit about Regents exams. And for those of you that are in the education world, this year has been very interesting. So we do have to give Regents exams this year. The state applied to the federal government for a waiver to give Regents exams, and it was denied. So the state then turned around and said, okay, you have to give Regents exams, and they narrowed it down to 4 specific areas of Regents exams that we need to give. So algebra, ELA, and 2 science exams. So we're giving 4 exams. We also have to give our checkpoint B exams, but here's the fun part. Remote kids that are at home don't have to come in and take it. Kids that come in and take it don't have to pass it. So they get a choice. I know. I know.
Wait, say that again.
Okay, so kids are at home on remote. We cannot make them come in and take it. If they choose
Is
not to
there
take
a consequence for that?
No, I'll tell you that. So,
Okay.
no, so if they're at home and if they're completely remote, they do not have to come in and take it. Kids that are here, if they choose to take it, they don't have to pass it. So on their transcript, which is really the only official record that they have two choices. If they come in and take the exam, and let's say they come in and they get a 95, they're going to say, I want that 95 on my transcript. If they come in and they get a 72 and that's not what on their transcript, they can say put exempt on my transcript. So the students have a choice at the end of the year whether it says a grade or exempt on their transcript.
So if they're a remote child, it would just read exempt? If they
Correct.
chose
If they don't take the exam, it would read exempt.
So for our in-person students, there's
Yes.
really.
We're encouraging them to-
There is no risk for them to take,
Correct.
and we are encouraging them to take it. Some of these students were, all the Regents exams were canceled last year.
Correct.
And now 6 of the 10 are canceled this year. And there are students, they're going to, most likely, they're not going to be canceled next year.
No.
And there's going to be students who need Regents exams, and it will benefit from having had that experience of sitting. So there's really.
Well, I think about some of our 10th graders haven't
Right.
sat for a Regents exam yet. So that they haven't had that experience of sitting in a room to take a 2 or 3 hour exam. So we've had multiple letters go home already encouraging students to take those Regents exams. I said there's a series of letters going home tomorrow. One of them is talking about our teachers are going to ask students who is going to require transportation because we don't have regular transportation runs set up for the secondary building. So I'm going to need to let transportation know who's going to be coming in for those Regents exams so that they can build a bus route to get those kids in here.
Right, so they don't have to pass it for their graduation requirement.
Correct.
Is what it is.
Correct.
And
They're exempt from it.
They're exempt from the graduation requirement.
Right.
So they still want to pass it because they might not
Correct.
potentially have it show up as a
Right.
good grade on their transcript.
Correct.
but
Absolutely.
It's
Yep.
not required for graduation.
So it's either going to read their grade.
Grade
Or exempt.
Yes.
And it's the student's choice.
It's the student's choice.
Got it. Okay.
Yes. I said it was interesting.
Yeah. What a job.
We haven't even got to the most interesting.
Oh,
Don't worry.
Can I just ask you really quick?
Sure.
What did you find, like your home visits? Did you find that it was a positive and people were receptive?
Very. 99% of them, yes. We're extremely receptive to us showing up. And part of that is we are a small community. They know who we are, so it's not some stranger coming to the door. I would say, it's funny to watch people's reactions when I'm standing at the door and Deputy Howland is standing behind me, and he's like, no, I'm just driving them here. So yeah, I would say 99.9% of the families were appreciative that we were there and, happy to see us and thanked us before
That's
we
great.
left.
That's great. Thank
Absolutely.
you for doing that.
Yep.
But in many cases, to Bob's credit, sometimes he's the person in the building that the student has a connection with.
Yes.
And we're very fortunate in that regard. So he's
Well,
he's not just Uber Bob.
No,
But
he's not.
he's an active
No.
member of
No,
your.
but I joke with, and the
your
difference
PSO.
with Bob is he's done this for years. He's gone to families' homes, and they're used to seeing him in the area. So a lot of them are very familiar with him. End of year events. So we do, that's some of the exciting news, that we are going to be able to do some things this year that we weren't able to do last year at the end of the year. So we're going to have an NHS, or National Honor Society, induction on May 27th. We did make a change to it because this year's current seniors had a virtual induction last year. So they never got to physically come in and light their candles and do the whole ceremony. So we inducted 7 new seniors now, but we also had 20 current members. And we also inducted another 20 juniors, or are going to be inducted. So the decision we made is, on May 27th, we're going to hold a ceremony for our seniors. All 27 of them will be re-inducted into the National Honor Society. And then come September, we will hold an induction ceremony for our juniors to start out the year and get them rolling. And hopefully at that point, being able to bring even more people. So the way, for the 27th, we will have the newly inducted members come, and 2 members from their family be able to come as well. We also have planned award assemblies for middle school, high school, and athletics. Those will be what I'm going to call hybrid. So if we did all the awards that we generally do, we would not be able to have it live or in person. So we're pulling out the big awards and going to give the big awards in a live presentation. And so, not that all the awards aren't important, but some of the awards, there's 60 or 70 recipients of. So National Honor Society or those kind, or not, I'm sorry, High Honor Roll, those would generally come in and get a pin. If I invite all those people in, I'm not going to be able to invite families. So those awards will get letters. That will be virtual, that portion of it. But any of the larger awards will be given in person, and they will be able to bring 2 family members apiece as well. We are able now, and I will get into more detail in a little bit, to do our junior prom, which will be on June 5th, and our senior ball, which will be on June 11th. We also have a senior day planned for June 11th. We also have our graduation rehearsal, which is planned for June 25th, and our graduation, which is planned for June 26th. I did not say times, and there is a reason for that. All right, we're okay. Look at that, you kept up. So now this is the fun part.
You jumped ahead of me a little bit. You put about 5 slides into one sentence.
I tried. All right, so this is the fun part. So our junior prom is on June 5th at Clifton Springs Country Club. The senior ball is on June 11th at the Bellhurst Castle. Now, this is the fun part. On May 3rd, when I woke up in the morning and came to school, I had guidance, and we had talked about this guidance. I talked a little bit to you guys about this guidance. I had guidance. It gave me a direction. At this time last year, I didn't even have that. So we've been working for weeks to come up with different options. We met with kids. I met with the advisors to come up with different options about what we can do for prom and ball. And it's probably a daily conversation that I have with the advisors. So we came up with surveys to give to the kids, both the juniors and the seniors, separate surveys. Because the juniors did not miss out on a prom last year, the seniors did. So we wanted to put emphasis on making sure that the seniors got as much as they could, because we were not able to, as a district, to give them a junior prom last year. So we had, for the juniors, we had one option. This is what we're going to do. We're going to have the prom at the country club. You can come, we'll have dinner. You can't have guests. That was the option for the juniors. For the seniors, we had 3 different options. We could have it at the Bellhurst, no guests. We could have it outdoor on the tennis courts, no guests, no food. Or we could have it outdoor on the tennis courts, no guests, no food, with a guest. Okay, this also came from the kids.
With testing, yeah.
What's that?
With testing, right?
With testing, yes. That Bellhurst required us to test kids. So I had those surveys on May 3rd. We were all excited. I put them out first thing in the morning when I got here to work. By about noon that day, Governor Cuomo got on the news and crashed my world, changed everything. So as of May 3rd, the limit for an indoor event was 150 people. After May 3rd, that had changed to 250 people. Now, the other difference was, before May 3rd, 150 people, you still had to test. So when I say that, you either had to show a completed vaccination regime or a negative test before you could be allowed entry. As of May 3rd, it went up to 250. You don't have to test if you stay under that number. So great changes, but back to the drawing board again. So we are now able to do those events differently. Let's see what else we got. So these limits are, like I said, are within, you don't have to test people, which is the big thing, because Ms. Marshall and I started to look around, where can we buy rapid COVID tests to be able to give, possibly 200 to 250 kids COVID tests before they come to the junior prom and senior ball. So what do we have to do? We have to make sure that we contact trace. So we now have a form that kids are going to sign out. There's a combined sign-out purchase of the ticket, and also if they're bringing a date, a request to be able to come. So that we have to give contact tracing to the event venue before we show up. Every student that comes or every person that comes has to fill out our normal health screener. You have to wear a mask the entire time except when you're eating. Everybody has to stay socially distanced while they're dancing, 6 feet. So we've decided, and I'm joking, we're going to buy pool noodles, and everybody's going to hold a pool noodle while they're dancing. Meals are interesting because our old buffet lines, you can't really do unless the food is served to them. And we've already talked to Bellhurst, and that's actually more expensive now because they have to hire more staff to do it than it is to feed us a sit-down dinner. So it will be a sit-down dinner. At the country club, it will be a buffet. They are going to have people serving us from the buffet line. We can't have multiple kids going through and picking up things and dishing it out to themselves. So that is, so far, the junior prom and senior ball. Graduation. This is where it gets even more fun. So graduation is planned for Saturday, June 26th. Notice that there is not a time on there. The rain date is June 27th, and our rehearsal is June 25th. Graduation options. So there's a reason I still have options. So Governor Cuomo also changed outdoor event numbers. Outdoor event numbers before May 3rd were 200 people outdoors. And when I say these numbers, I mean before you have to start testing everybody. Okay? So we can go above those numbers, but then everybody that comes in either has to be tested or show proof of vaccination, which I think we would all agree is going to eliminate some people from being able to attend some of these events. So prior to May 3rd, the outdoor limit was 200 people without proof of vaccination or testing. After May 3rd at about noon, it now goes up to 500 people, which is a big difference.
Yes.
It creates a much larger opportunity for us. Here's where the fun part comes. So the part that I need to know is, because remember when I told you a while ago there was also capacities on those, so you know it depends on the venue. So it was 150 people inside back then. It was at a 50% capacity for whatever that venue was. If you look at the guidance I still have in paper, I haven't gotten new paper guidance. This is all from what Governor Cuomo said, but also speaking to Ontario County Department of Health, who has confirmed the numbers, the limit numbers, and the fact that we don't have to test. So what I don't have is I don't have what the capacity percentage is going to be for our venue. Mr. Reefsack and I were talking about, how can we look at the space that we have out there, and even if it stayed, because currently on the paper I have it's 33% capacity of that venue at 500 people. So if I took just what we've calculated so far, I wouldn't be able to do really what I want to do for graduation. But I think we can manage it if we use some of the other spaces and calculate that into our capacity. And this is not me fudging it. This is me being, we're doing it by the letter of the law. But I think we can get there. So, but I still need options of what we're going to do. So the fun part is that we learned, because they've now come up with 2 versions of the written guidance to us. They've changed it once already. And the second version, they did say that if we have kids enter and exit from a different location than where the guests are coming from, if they are considered separate, so if we rope them off on the football field, they're now in a separate location, they do not count in our overall number. So that number of 500, if we're able to go up to it, our 133 students that are sitting on the field roped off that came in from the back and the parents came in from the front don't count. So I can have 500 people that are able to come. So my options. Essentially, what we did last year, a virtual graduation in here by appointment, where kids would individually go across the stage, we'd read their name, any awards that they won. They'd probably be able to bring 15 to 20 family members, get their pictures taken, go out in the hallway, take more family pictures, and then a actual live graduation on the football field, students only, that would be live streamed to homes. That's option 1. Option 2 is split the class alphabetically into smaller groups, hold smaller graduation ceremonies so that they can invite 4 or 5 family members to each of those individual small graduations, and also live stream it. Option number 3, which is the one that I think we're all hoping for, is one event on the football field, all the students there, each student is able to bring 3 to 4 guests. And we would still live stream it, but at that point, that's really not a lot different than what we would normally do in here. Generally, when we're in here, everybody's allowed 4 tickets for family members. So it's really, if we can get the 3 to 4, we're right where we were if we were in here. The only difference is we're now outside. So I think we're all hoping that we could all be together and have that ceremony. And we're hoping.
But students will be surveyed on these?
Yes. Surveys and families will be surveyed on that. I just need that final guidance of what my capacity limit is on the football field.
And it appears that everything's moving in the direction of more flexible. So
Yep.
But we're hopeful.
And then we will still, we are planning, and I was talking to Deputy Holland this afternoon, we're going to plan the parade for after graduation and fireworks as well, just like we did last year. So that has been my travel over the last 2 weeks. Questions?
I had a quick question about, you mentioned fireworks there at the end. I had a question posed to me about who was covering that. I thought at one point we talked the school was, or the
The
Chem
district
3?
is going to
The
cover
district
that.
will cover,
Yep.
okay, thank you.
Any other questions?
I had one quick question.
Sure.
Not for you.
Oh.
You covered
Even
it.
better.
Good job. Who presented way back at the beginning of this, didn't we talk about response rates?
Right.
How long did it take us to get to the 50% response rate?
We extended it, we extended it by 24 hours. So it was posted, I think on a Monday in the afternoon, it was due Thursday at noon, and we extended it to Friday at noon.
Okay.
Any other questions? Thank you so much for the wealth of knowledge.
Thank you. Thank you.
Actually,
Good
hey,
luck
Frank,
to you.
Frank, I do
A
have
lot of
one.
information.
Frank, I do have one for you.
Oh.
Sorry, I had it written up. You want clarification on the capacity percentage versus the number? Where, is that going to come from the state or from the county DOH?
Good
Either would be
question.
great, but I think we're more likely to get it from the state. In that original document that I had, like I've said, they've been updating that document, so we're hoping for another update to that document with the percentage rates. But like I said, Mr. Reefsack and I are going to work on that so that really what I'd like to try to do is be able to get, even if it stays at the 33%, I want to be able to get there with the 33%, which I think we can do.
Right.
If I'm doing the math right in my head, I think we can get there. Because if I look at just what we have in stadium seating, we have almost 1,000 seats in stadium seats. That's not counting any of the field space. So I think we can get, I need to get to about 1,520 to be able to consider that.
The challenge is comparing what we hold in writing on a piece of paper versus keeping track of what the governor said at a
Yes.
random press conference.
That seems like a really new challenge.
Yeah, and sometimes, eventually, what he says
Comes
makes
along.
it into a document, and sometimes it doesn't. So we need to do some more checking. There's the possibility that this has been addressed verbally, but it was missed in all the you know how those press conferences go. So any clarification we can get from wherever we can get
Yes.
it is going to help us in our
And
plan.
I would say for us, the major difference is we did this last year. So we're not starting from square one. So we know how to plan for the graduation on football field. If we need to do the virtual graduation, we know what we need to do for that. It's just a matter of which of those versions are we going to do and what little intricacies are we going to have to put in place for each one.
And they're only counting students that come in from a separate
Yeah.
entrance? So like,
So if you went,
Well, I think
if
what
you
he's
went
getting
with
at is
four
we count.
separate,
right, if you guys came in a different.
I think we would probably still be in that number because we're separate. We
Right.
came in through a separate
Yeah.
entrance.
Okay.
So we wouldn't count towards those numbers either.
You read my mind, and that, by the way, scares me.
Yeah. Yep.
How many entrances can you have at an event?
Listen to us.
yeah,
How many
we're still
entrances-
working through
How many
that, but,
entrances can you have in an event?
yeah.
You're right.
We're going to talk about a
1,500
lot of
outside
different
without
creative.
flags.
Very strategic.
Yeah, it really, that feedback we get is going to be important too,
Oh,
because,
absolutely.
if
It's really
the
gonna try
answer
to-
is they want 4 separate ceremonies, then that changes the dynamics significantly. Changes what the ceremony looks like, because you're not going to do 4 full length. They'll be much shorter and it'll be different. But, if the voice of the students and the families is that they want one ceremony, then we want to maximize those options.
Thanks.
Yep. Thank you, guys.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Okay, moving on to presentation B, planning for the use of, the federal funds.
Okay. We'll try to move fast on this one. Frank, that was all your fault. Okay, so as we talked about earlier in the budget hearing, we received, an increase in state foundation aid, which really enabled us to go out as a 0% tax levy, hit some equipment needs. But then what really helped is we found out that we were getting some pretty significant federal relief funds that were going to allow us to meet learning gaps, social emotional needs, operational needs outside of the budget. Now, we have to be strategic in how we do that, but we want to just start the process of giving you an overview. And I say start the process because at 4 o'clock today, a little bit more information came out on one of these pots of money. So we're still waiting for clarification on the rules of how to spend it. So we're going to give you a taste of some of the ideas we're looking at of how we're going to use this money strategically, not create a financial cliff for ourselves, try to think long term, but meet the needs in the most impactful way. But we expect to have more information, hopefully more information in June, so that we have a more concrete plan at that point, so that, because for the rescue plan money specifically, by July 1 of each year that we have the funds available, we have to post a plan. I imagine those plans will be living documents throughout the year as needs change, but we want to be very transparent about that planning process and what we have available. So, Tracy, you do a much better job with this than I do.
You're too
talk
kind.
quickly about the different pots of money?
Sure. So I'm going to start with the CRRSA funds, which is the Coronavirus Response and Relief Supplemental Appropriations Act. This was approved under the Trump administration in December. As part of that package, we were allocated at $1.5 million. And in this pot of money, if you will, we can utilize it in ways that we have formally used our title and IDEA grants. We're pretty familiar with what those requirements are. In fact, as Matt mentioned, we got the application late this afternoon. We're also looking at the possibility of the dates to use this funding going to 2023. That I've seen that date in a couple different places and on the application itself. However, in other places, it remains 2022, so we're just waiting for a clarification. It would be obviously a little bit more helpful to have the 2-year cycle to be able to use these funds in a strategic manner. Mr. Sickles will go over some of our plans for allocating those funds in a few more slides, but basically we're looking at addressing learning gaps, supplementing our English language learners, social emotional supports, and additional classroom supports as well. And the second allocation we received from the American Rescue Plan Act, and this was under the Biden administration, was up to the amount of about $4 million. This funding has a little bit different usage requirements. There are specific areas that the district would need to address with specific allocations. These allocations were set by the federal government, and then the state had to decide how they wanted to allocate the money for each area. There was a floor on some of the funding levels for these areas, and ultimately the state legislators determined the amount of funding that was to be appropriated for each of these areas. This funding does go from 2021 to 2024. The targeted areas that we'll be looking at is summer school programming. We have an allocation of $336,000 of that $4 million that we have to spend on summer school programming. After-school programming is the same amount. We'll be looking at those programs a little later on in our planning process. Learning loss, $1.6 million of the $4 million has to be addressed, the learning loss that has occurred due to the COVID pandemic. And the other is areas that we can strategically use that money to address infrastructure or supplies and materials for maintenance and facilities. We could also utilize it for expenses that we've incurred in this past year, so it can be retroactive. And again, Mr. Sickles will be going through some of our plans for the use of that money. We do not have any specific guidance. There was one document that came out the day of the funding, and it's very general. And we have no application or very specific details on these targeted areas. We're making assumptions in our planning process that we think that would meet the needs of the requirements that hopefully will come out in any materials that we receive. But we, you know, as Mr. Sickles mentioned, we're trying to be cautious and transparent in that we don't have all the guidance yet, but we're hopeful that our plans will be able to implement as we are going through, and that plan is due July 1st. So again, it will be very, what was the word that you used?
Living document.
Living document.
So I want to call attention before I go to the next slide, you know, those first two lines, summer school and after school, or it's really extended school day. It could be before and or after school programming. And you'll see those numbers are identical because they're based upon percentages of certain parts of the money. It's 14.286% of a certain part of the money, which is why it's, you know, those are identical numbers. So we have $336,000 to spend on summer school programming over the 3-year life of the grant, and the same for after school. The next slide is on summer school. We don't have a separate slide for the extended school day yet because summer's coming first. So we're a little further on in our planning process on summer. But we know then we got to lean into what that extended school day program is going to look like. So it's on our list, but we're just further along on the summer. So it's going to enable us to do some things with summer school that we haven't been able to do before. So we do anticipate a focus on in-person opportunities. You know, very early guidance seems that we have some flexibility to pick the model, and we anticipate being able to do in-person instruction. We don't know yet whether we have to offer a remote option. We're hoping, you know, given the reasons why students would need summer school, to be able to focus on in-person. We look forward to increasing programming for both special education and general education students through this funding. We're looking at targeted interventions in literacy and math to support successful grade level advancement. That's the ultimate goal, is to get students back on grade level so that they can advance as they normally would have. We want to provide, if possible, Tier 1 social emotional support for all of our summer students who attend. The team has been working with some scheduling models that look much different than we've run summer school ever before. And more of a K-12 mindset to summer school. So we're really excited about that. We want to try to focus on high interest activities and instruction to meet learning needs. We know that the students who've struggled the most struggled with remote learning, they struggled with hybrid learning, and quite honestly, they probably struggled with traditional type of instruction. So we want to look at more non-traditional ways to engage them and to fill their time. It may not be a full day, it might be a partial day, but have it broken up with maybe some higher interest, non-traditional activities that keep them active, keep them interested, but probably also hit some of those social emotional needs as well. We look forward to building in music, arts, PE, and summer enrichment as well. And really important, because this is, you know, very often a barrier for students in the summer, is transportation, is to be able to use these funds to provide and to ensure round-trip transportation for all summer school students. So these are sort of preliminary goals, things that we're shooting for. We have some structures in place, but we just wanted to give you a sense of the direction we're heading in. We'll hope to have much more information and a lot of this already starting to be unfolded by the time we present to you in June. Let me just stop there for a second and address any questions. No?
I think the summer school proposed, all that it entails looks good. I'm glad that it's including all the things that it's including, and especially the high-interest activities, so that encourages students to engage. And I guess I didn't realize we didn't have transportation for summer school in the past, right?
We have, but there's been some limitations to it. We see an opportunity here to make sure that that is not a barrier for anybody.
Good. I could see that would
There's some
be a hindrance.
logistics we have to work through, but that's a goal that we have, is to remove that as a barrier.
And traditionally, if I'm thinking summer school is usually filling in those gaps for the kids that need things, but that are behind or have a gap, but it looks, as I'm looking through here, this may be offered to a variety of students.
Correct.
Including enrichment and so more like in a summer academy or something.
That's what we're hoping, is
Right,
to have it to be as inclusive as possible.
Great.
Now that we've divided out in terms of like tier 1 versus tier 2 and 3 support for students, and this is more school year based, one of the dangers with one-time money is adding positions, because positions represent recurring costs. But we had sizable allocations of $5.5 million. And for an organization, a school district, that 75 to 80% of our costs are salary and benefits, it's difficult to spend that amount of money impactfully without adding positions. So we're certainly looking to cover one-time expenses that have impact, but there's no getting around adding positions. There's some positions we need to close some of the learning gaps that have occurred. We just have to have a plan in place in our minds and roughly on paper, though it needs to be adaptable, to look at things in terms of, are they a short-term or long-term need? If they're a short-term need, they close the gap that they're targeted for. They may be designed to only be a 1 or 2 year position, and we'd be transparent about that. If they were anticipated to be a long-term need, we would use the grant funds up front, but then we'd have to dedicate ourselves to looking at how do you absorb those longer-term positions into the budget, take them out of the grant funds and get them into the budget over time. And if the state follows through on their promise to fully fund the foundation aid formula, that might be a little bit more possible than if they don't. And then the other thing is if we're not able to sustain certain positions, is try to look at projected retirements and to absorb them through attrition, through retirement, rather than layoff. So those are hard things to talk about when you're talking about adding things that are good for kids, but we have to look at it from a business perspective too, to make sure that we're not creating a financial cliff for ourselves in the way that we allocate this money. So these are just some ideas that we feel really good about and that we're going to try to make a reality, but we'll have more information as we go forward. So from a tier 1 perspective, we're looking at potentially adding classroom teachers at targeted primary grade levels where our data shows the greatest learning loss this year, to reduce class size and enhance tier 1 instruction. We're looking at the possibility of teaching assistants at targeted grade levels to enhance tier 1 instruction by providing support to the classroom teacher and another adult who can assist with tier 1 instruction. We're looking at school counselor or school counselors plural potentially at the K-6 level to provide tier 1 social emotional support. We're able to add our first ever elementary school counselor 2 budget cycles ago. But as we look at the needs of our students, as Frank spoke about the social emotional needs of our secondary students, that's certainly true of our elementary students as well, and that's an area where we'll be looking. We're looking at additional 7-12 student support from a Tier 1 level. You're going to see that show up on the Tier 2, 3 as well, because we're not quite sure what type of position we might look at, to whether it would be one approach for Tier 1 and one approach for Tier 2, 3, or we might find a hybrid way of hitting both of those needs. Professional development targeted for reading and math to support Tier 1 instruction for all students. Curriculum materials and supplies, these are one-time costs that would be a great use of these funds because they're not recurring costs. And then again, that extended school day program before and or after school, that's all it has right now. It doesn't have its own slide. We know we need to dig into that once we get the summer piece, fleshed out. But we currently have that on the Tier 1 slide versus the Tier 2, Tier 3, because ideally, it would be great if that was available to all students and not just those who are struggling in the specific area. But we have to learn more about the availability of these funds as we go. From a Tier 2, 3 support perspective, we're looking at the potential for adding back a reading and math AIS teachers at K-6. We, last budget cycle, absorbed those positions. Now might be the time, either short-term or long-term, to add back those positions to meet those learning gaps in reading and math. We're looking at the potential of hiring a 7-12 special education teacher to reduce class sizes and to meet the needs of a bubble of students who are coming through. The school psychologist position that we absorbed early in the year, we look forward to adding that back and using the grant funds to pay for it, to provide, meet IEP needs and various Tier 2 and Tier 3 social emotional supports. Again, additional 7-12 student support from the social emotional end, more on the Tier 2, Tier 3 level, but that might get into not just social emotional, but attendance intervention and community engagement. So again, we're going to look at that Tier 1 and then the Tier 2, 3 needs and see how we might be creative in combining those. And then looking at additional ways to support our ENL students, either through a teacher and or bilingual translation opportunities, which are currently a barrier for many of our families. So those are things we're looking at as well. And then from an operational standpoint, materials and supplies to support in-person instruction, and we're going to get a better sense of what that might look like as the guidance comes out and evolves for summer and school year. The clerical position that at one point had been identified as a reduction, we're going to take out of the budget but restore it through the federal funds. A cleaner labor position, you're going to see this already shows up on the agenda tonight to create a position because this is one we know we need to support the enhanced summer program, but then also knowing that we're committed to in-person instruction for next school year, we're going to need that added support, and that can come out of the federal funds as well. And then other COVID health and safety measures that we identify and that evolve over time can kind of come in out of that other category that Tracy talked about earlier. So that's really, we're in the preliminary stages. Those are, probably after 3 brainstorming sessions and moving things around and prioritizing. We have other things on a list, but these are the things that we're focusing on first. We need to learn more about the rules and procedures around the funds and what's the most strategic way to make these funds stretch and last as long as possible. And then, some of the things may not make the list, but if we get the foundation aid next year that we're promised, we may have other opportunities. So More to come in June on this, but we wanted to give the board a sense of some of the things that we're working on. Questions? Okay.
Okay, moving on to reports. For County School Boards Association, nothing to report. Okay, report B, superintendent's report.
Oh, you didn't even give me a second to catch my breath. Okay, let me find the right sheet here. I'll do this really quickly. I do want to pull up, because you're going to be, there's a motion on the agenda to amend the school calendar for the current school year. Very quickly, it relates to June. Frank touched upon this earlier. They went from 10 Regents exams to 4, so fewer dates marked by the star or Regents exam dates. You'll see there's actually a 5th on the 21st. That's the checkpoint B foreign language exam, which is sort of a local Regents equivalent. By administering that exam on that day, we can count it as an instructional day. So the last day of classes will be the 16th. The 18th will be, school will be open at 7 through 12, but it will not be a traditional day of attendance, but it'll be a heavy credit recovery day to enhance the other credit recovery opportunities at the secondary level. So those are the changes. It does identify up here in the middle that June 16th is the last day of regular classes for 7-12. So it's just a minor change to the current school calendar to reflect those changes. Okay. Very quickly, 2 months ago maybe, February, March, did a presentation on merging our beds codes from 4 schools down to 2. We received notification last week that that was approved effective July 1, so we're very excited. I know our business administrator is especially excited because that will streamline some of the reporting that's required, but it'll better reflect our actual operations. The capital project we announced previously, we had made an effort to expedite the capital project. We were encouraged by our construction management firm to try to capitalize on better bidding, so we went out. We were joined by apparently every other school district in New York State had a similar idea, so we only last week got approval on phase 1. So our decision to defer panned out because now would not be the time to go out to bid, and it would put the start of school in September in significant jeopardy. So now we have phase 1 approval in our pocket. Now we can bid at the most optimal time for us, which will be sometime next winter, but we'll work with our architects and construction management firm to decide what's the best time. But it's nice to have that done. The back and forth of more information and clarification is over. We have the approval, and we can pick the time that works for us. Constant communication going on with Ontario County. To date, right now, if you're following the news, they're having a hard time giving more vaccinations. It seems like everybody who wants to be vaccinated has been. There's plenty of opportunities. It's now open to 16, 17-year-olds. They're not filling those spots. It could go to 12 for the Pfizer by the end of this week. So as that happens, we will consider, polling the families of our 12 and above, if it is approved, to see if there's interest in hosting a pop-up clinic here at the school. And we'll share those numbers with the county, and if they think that there's numbers to support it, they have been working with schools, partnering with schools as vaccination sites. They just have to have confirmation. So, we wouldn't just rest on the sign-up sheet. We would do confirmation, because there's at least one school where the family said, we want our 16, 17-year-olds vaccinated. They, reported that number to the county. The county showed up, and the student said, and vaccine went to waste. So we want to make sure that if we're going to do it, that we're confirming the number and that it's in the county's best interest. But certainly, we expect our students now to have plenty of opportunities to be vaccinated if that's something that they choose to do or their families do. And then just a reminder, our budget vote and school board election is next Tuesday, May 18th. Crystal, make sure I don't get this wrong, noon to 9 in the middle school gymnasium. Voting is in person. Absentee ballot applications are available upon request, but time is running out on that, so please reach out to Crystal ASAP if you need an absentee ballot. And there will be COVID protocols and health screenings in place for voters to come in, but we will also, by law, we will have alternate arrangements as needed to accommodate people to make sure that everybody has the opportunity to vote. And that is my superintendent's report.
All right, great job. Okay, moving on to public comment. The Board of Education values the input of the Midlakes community and welcomes public comment on any topic related to board work with the exceptions of matters pertaining to individual personnel and/or students. All public comments must include appropriate language and observe proper decorum. Anyone making public comment must identify themselves by name and address. The public comment period will be limited to a total of 30 minutes and 1 comment per person. Individual comments will be limited to 2 minutes. The board does not respond to items presented or questions raised through public comment. However, the board may discuss topics of public comment at a later time and/or contact the individual who submitted the comment. Tonight I have 1 public comment by Jamie Wright. Come on up.
You'll have to bear with me. I'm not a big public speaker. So hello and good evening. My name is Jamie Wright, and I'm a longtime resident of the town of Phelps. I live at 28 Hillside Drive in Clifton Springs, and I currently have a child, who most of you saw here tonight, who is a student in the Phelps-Clifton Springs School District. First and foremost, I'd like to thank the Board of Education for allowing me to speak about a concern that I have as it relates to the notification email that I received from the district superintendent, Mr. Sickles. In the May 3rd notification, Mr. Sickles informed Midlakes families and staff that a decision was made not to pursue full in-person learning for grades 7 through 12 for the remainder of the school year. While no specific reason was cited for this decision, Mr. Sickles alluded to a meeting that he had with the Ontario County Department of Public Health and how the current COVID-19 Ontario County community transmission rate was at 141 cases. This was as of last Monday, May 3rd. And that they did not anticipate the transmission status lowering below the high level by next week. He also mentioned the inability to cohort middle and high school students, and then followed it up with a comment about some preliminary data from the online family questionnaire. What is most troublesome to me is the timing of this decision. Was this decision arrived at by just Mr. Sickles, or was this a collaborative decision between Mr. Sickles and the Ontario County Department of Health, with or without the Board of Education approval? All of the recent COVID-19 data is trending towards improvement, not only at the county level, but the state level, and even at the national level. In fact, as of a report yesterday, May 9th at 4:30 p.m., the Ontario County Health Department website indicated that there was only 1 new positive COVID-19 test. As an update, I think the report today showed 10, so that's 11 cases in the last 2 days. I certainly acknowledge the difficulties surrounding the requirements and guidance that has been passed down by the New York State Education Department in conjunction with the New York State Department of Health last month on April 9th. I am well aware of the threshold that delineates high community transmission rate of risk from that of substantial risk. But obviously, with only 1 positive test, the trend is significantly improving. As Mr. Sickles mentioned in the notification, there may be a number of students who may not wish to return to full in-person learning. We got some data on that tonight. This data from the questionnaire, however, might just be the opportunity that would actually allow those students and parents that are comfortable with having their children attend full in-person learning to be able to safely return to full in-person learning, even while the transmission risk remains high. Mr. Sickles said that the data, quote, did not show overwhelming support for a change in learning models for students in grades 7 through 12, end quote. To me, this would equate to less students in the classrooms, and therefore it would be highly likely that the minimum social distance requirement of 6 feet could now be achieved, and essentially would allow for those students that do desire to be in full in-person learning to do just that. Obtaining a firm commitment of those students through the questionnaire would not only ensure the minimum social distancing of 6 feet, but also relieve the district from needing to keep an eye on the changing transmission rate. The current guidance does allow both middle and high school students to be in full person learning, even at high transmission rates, as long as 6-foot social distancing in classrooms can be maintained. It also says that they don't have to, what it says here is schools that cannot use cohorting, which we heard about middle and high school, at least 6 feet distance between students, and that can be in the high transmission. It is my opinion that the premature decision to no longer consider full in-person learning for students in grades 7 through 12 was a wrong decision to be made at that time. As a parent, I feel as though the district has sent a message to the Midlakes families and staff that they really don't care what happens with the county transmission rate, and it's just more convenient to keep the status quo for the rest of the year, and I get that. But this saddens me deeply. There is no denying that the pandemic has created extremely challenging and arduous times. But as we near the light at the end of the tunnel, it seems to me that the district is sending a message that it's going to be too difficult for the district to rearrange classrooms and possibly bus schedules and routes, and therefore the district will just remain status quo for grades 7 through 12. Essentially saying, we care about you, but sorry, it's just too late and it's not really worth it. In closing, I don't expect the district to reverse this decision. I merely wanted to take the opportunity to voice my thoughts and to let you know how disappointed I am with this decision. Thank you, and again, I appreciate the opportunity to speak to you tonight.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Okay, moving on to board discussion, we can move into item A, which is a discussion around increased in-person instruction. Are there any thoughts, comments surrounding that? I can give you a minute to look back in your packets, because that was...
I guess I'm glad to hear that the first day went well for, the kindergarten through 6th graders, back to in full. So that was good to hear.
Yes, I also heard from someone directly that was very impressed with the drop-off. They said even though it was way out, they kept moving and it went smoothly, and so congrats to that.
And I personally had the quickest pickup today that I've had in a couple weeks. So I think pickup went well too. That was good. Definitely found some adjustments that worked.
Any other thoughts or comments?
I'll just make one comment just in regards to the questionnaire. I think, a little disappointing to be missing half of the families responding. I think it is tough to get a gauge on what people really want. I mean, to assume that just that percentage of people wanting to come back and then transfer that into 705 responses, I'm not sure that's really the right way to do it. I understand that if people didn't respond, you almost have to assume that they want to go one way or another. But I think the root of it is it's just disappointing that people couldn't just tell us what they want to do. Because without that information, we can't make a really educated decision. So that's a little disappointing for sure.
I want to agree with Sherry and that work today to our first presenters that came up with this 6 or 8 hours ago. And to all the staff down there, I think it's great that we got there. And looks like we're going to continue with it. I don't think any of us are ecstatic about not having 7 to 12 back in the building. I think that to suggest otherwise is unfair to everyone sitting up here and everyone that works in the district. Of course we want them. I think we have to, on top of the planning for what we're going to do with the federal funding to try to backfill on learning gaps, I think we have to, now set our focus on how to make sure we do it right in September with everyone.
And, I appreciate all the planning that's going into all the activities to help make sure that those kids have those opportunities. And even though it's ever changing, it's evident that it is a collaborative process and all hands are on deck and you're surveying kids and it's multiple voices being asked. So I appreciate that. That's a lot. Any other thoughts around increased in-person instruction? Were there any board discussion items around the allocation of federal funds? The poll.
So Tracy, both of these have 2 different timelines?
So both of them will start in 2021, but some of them, the ARPA funds will hopefully we'll use over a 3-year period, and the CRRSA funds we're hoping to have a 2-year period for. The ARPA funds, we're not certain if it ends in 2024 or if it just has to be allocated by 2024, so that may be extended too, kind of like the CRRSA funds, we thought 2022 and now it's 2023. Until we get more guidance on that, on the length of time we have to use that, that's what we're going with for now.
So if they're not used or allocated, then you lose them. Is that
correct? Yes.
So that's why it's imperative to get a plan in place and know your deadlines and.
And the timing is essential, as Mr. Sickles spoke about, because that gives us time to plan, to incorporate the positions we want to keep into our budget. So the longer we kind of can use them over time will give us more opportunity to be able to do that.
Is that it? Everybody good? Okay, thank you. All right, moving on to new business. I'm set.
I make a motion to approve the updated reopening schools plan for the Phelps-Clifton Springs School District for the 2020-2021 school year.
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Motion carried.
I make a motion to approve the amendment resolution to the plan administrator for Phelps-Clifton Springs Central School District, as stated in the agenda.
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Motion carried.
I make a motion to approve the 2021-2022 APPR plan, as stated on the agenda.
Second.
Is there any discussion on that? All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Motion carried.
All right, so D is the Four County School Boards Association absentee vote for officers and banking. Given that all positions are uncontested, I'd like to make a motion to vote yes on all the positions on the ballot and yes on all the bank signatories.
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Motion carried.
I make a motion to approve the following athletic mergers: girls JV and varsity lacrosse, and girls modified lacrosse.
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Motion carried.
I make a motion to amend the 2020-2021 school district calendar.
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Motion carried.
I make a motion to approve the election inspection inspectors for the annual budget vote on May 18th, listed 1 through 5 as presented in the agenda.
I second the inspection inspectors.
Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Motion carried.
I make a motion to approve the creation of a 1.0 full-time employee laborer position effective May 11th, 2021.
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Motion carried.
Make a motion to approve the establishment and funding of the Andrew and Angelina Bartuca Memorial Scholarship.
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Motion carried. I don't hear you guys.
I make a motion to accept the donation of $462 from the Midlakes Swim and Dive Boosters Club for the boys' swimsuits.
Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Motion carried. Moving on to personnel.
I make a motion to accept the retirements of Ann Leverty and Gail Kayer.
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Motion carried.
Make a motion to approve the intent to retire for Richard Eldridge, Tracy McMath, and Lynn Adams.
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Motion carried.
Make a motion to approve the resignation of Cassandra Turner, food service helper.
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Motion carried.
I make a motion to appoint Marilyn Booth as a probationary bus driver.
Second.
Any discussion?
Yay.
All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Motion carried.
I make a motion to approve the coaching appointments as listed 1 and 2 on the agenda.
Second.
Any discussion?
Yes. I just
Go ahead.
want to mention that it's nice to see some of our alumni coming back and doing some coaching.
All right.
Yeah.
I wanted to put that out there.
All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Motion carried.
I make a motion to approve the unpaid leave listed 1 through 6 on the agenda.
Second.
Any discussion on that? All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Motion carried. Moving on to adjournment and executive session.
I make a motion to adjourn the regular board meeting for the purpose of entering into executive session for the purpose of discussing matters leading to the appointment, employment, promotion, demotion, discipline, suspension, dismissal, or removal of a particular person and contract negotiations.
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carried. Thank you and have a good night.
Thank you, everyone.